Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, as we know, the U.S. government continually puts out their unemployment numbers, and they try to convince the United States, the people of the United States and the world, that everything is fine here. Unemployment's down to 5%. I wouldn't be surprised if it drops down to 4.9, 4.8% once again right before elections to make it look really, really good. And the U.S. government continually tells us that they keep adding jobs to retail. As we keep reporting, there's bankruptcies, store closures, and those numbers make no sense. Well, we're starting to get information that's coming out from Credit Suisse that this year, in 2016, there were more than 24,000 retail sector jobs that were cut in 2016. Now, we haven't finished 2016 right now. We're only in April. So when we look at this number and we compare it to 2009, 2010, we had about 30,273 layoffs. Right now we're at 24,000. Now Credit Suisse is saying that their projections for this year could be over 37,000 layoffs. Or it could be much, much higher. Because as we discussed on Friday, there are a lot of stores that are filing for bankruptcy. There are a lot of stores that are closing. So what this shows us is that something is not right once again. Now, it's either Credit Suisse is lying because they just came out and said, hey, we're seeing all these layoffs from retail. Why would they lie about that? It makes no sense. Or the government is lying to the people. Now, we hear a lot of people out there saying, yeah, these unemployment numbers, they're fake, phony, and false. And we're starting to get a lot of this information that's coming in, and we're starting to put the pieces together, and it's forming this picture, and it shows us that, yeah, the government is lying to the people, because it's completely impossible for retail to be expanding with all these employees, especially during this period of the year anyhow, which is the slow period of time. When we see the bankruptcies, when we see the store closures, when we see everything starting to shut down. And then here we have Credit Suisse out there showing us a completely different story. So this shows us that this entire economy is one big manipulation. Actually, they're exposed right now of manipulating the entire economy. We're starting to see cracks in the housing recovery. Actually, there was never a housing recovery. It was one gigantic bubble. They were able to keep the recovery alive and the bubble alive in certain cities. Now, they couldn't do it for the entire country because it would just be way, way too hard to do this. And also, they would need the help of the American person. Now, the American person is completely tapped out. We're getting more and more layoffs coming down the pike. These people cannot find jobs. And believe me, the last thing on their minds is saying, hey, you know what? I want to go out and buy a house. This is why Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and all the other financial institutions decided to lay off thousands upon people, thousands of people in their mortgage departments. And what we're seeing right now is that permits and starts, well, they're starting to roll over. New home sales, they printed at about 511,000 versus the 520,000 expected. There was a drop of about 1.5% month on month. This is the third month in a row that it has declined. Now, this is the longest such streak since July 2011. The West saw new home sales plunge by 23.6%. And we're starting to see that prices are coming down. Now, I took a look around the entire country. Yes, there are still hot spots in the country, but guess what? Those are disappearing very, very quickly. I'm starting to see the outskirts in those areas start to come inward into those cities. And we're starting to see that houses are on the market longer and longer. Prices are coming down. And the whole entire housing recovery is just that. It's manipulated. It's fake, it's phony, it's false, and we're starting to see that this isn't going to last that much longer. It reminds me once again of 2007 going into 2008. It feels like we're duplicating what happened there. Now, we know the Philly Fed, the Empire State, they have their numbers are completely declining. We know we had that one little pump up with the Philly Fed. And now we look at the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Survey. Well, they were only expecting a negative 10, which is terrible in itself, but it declined by negative 13.9. Now, this is the 16th consecutive month in contraction. And this is a very bad time for manufacturing, agriculture, mining. And we're starting to see that things are really starting to break down. The Dallas Fed says most of our clients are reporting slower sales heading into the second quarter and expect further slowing into the next quarters. So this shows us right now that things are rapidly falling apart. It is not getting better. Yes, are we going to see these seasonally adjusted numbers? Are we going to see seasonally adjusted sales? We're going to see little bump ups here and there. But when you really look at the bump ups that we do see coming down the line, they're not going to really do anything, because what's going to happen is right after that little bump up, like we've been seeing, it comes straight back down. And this shows us that this economy is struggling at this point. It shows us that consistently over time it is declining. It is not getting better whatsoever. Now, the U.S. government central bankers, they can tell us that it's getting better. They can say, yes, in the fourth quarter, everything's going to be picking up. And then in 2017, everything's going to be fantastic. Well, they've been saying this since 2008. And they pumped it up with all their free money. They created all these bubbles. And since 2013 or so, they've been saying it. 2014 is going to be the year the economy takes off. 2015 is going to be the year the economy takes off. 2016 is going to be the year the economy takes off. And guess what we've been seeing? Decline, decline again, getting worser, decline again, getting even worse, decline again, and it's continually happening. So everything they're telling us, we're seeing the opposite effect. Now we realize here in the United States, the central bank, the banking system, they have been given free money, or they're creating free money, and they're purchasing stocks to pump up the market. We know the plunge protection team, that's exactly what they do. They get the free money from the Fed, they pump it into the market, they buy stocks, and they keep the market alive. Well, Japan, they've been doing this for quite a while. And then we come to find out that the Bank of Japan is now a top 10 holder in 90% of the Japanese stock. They've been purchasing stock left and right to keep the market alive. This whole thing is one gigantic manipulation. It's a bubble that is going to pop. Now, Mario Draghi, he was out there and he said something very interesting, that the ECB has the right, the means, and the wherewithal to purchase corporate debt as it sees fit. So why is this such a concern? Well, we saw this happen here in the United States with GM. But GM was a little different. GM was like an isolated event. I know we did it with AIG, with the bailouts and things like that. But what he is saying is that he's going to decide which companies and how much. And what he's doing right now is trying to continually prop up the entire system because everything else is failing. And this is going to fail also because you just can't create money and buy things up. You just create bubble after bubble after bubble. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. And it's not going to end well when this whole thing pops. Actually, it's going to be a complete disaster, and we're getting closer and closer to this. Now, there are certain people that are already feeling the effects of the collapse. Other people that still have their jobs, they're scratching their heads saying, I don't know what everyone's talking about. Well, I like to see those people take their resume and try to get a job. Then you will see what it is like in the economy and what it's like in the job market. Because I have a lot of people who really thought the economy was doing well, and they said, oh, you know what? Since the unemployment is this low, I'm going to put my resume out there. I have a job right now, but I want to get a better job with higher pay. And guess what's happening? They can't find the job. It doesn't exist. And even when they send the resumes out, guess what? They're not getting any response. And they're scratching their heads saying, why is this happening? We're at 5% unemployment. They're telling us the economy is incredible. I should be able to increase my salary at this point. And it's not happening right now. We see Russia and China. They're taking their oil alliance to a whole new level. Right now, China is going to be purchasing part of Rosneft. They're going to be becoming a major shareholder to have access to more of it. And Rosneft is Russia's biggest oil producer. So we see Russia and China moving closer and closer together, separating themselves from the U.S., separating themselves from the U.S. dollar. Now, many nations have been actively turning their back on the dollar. Now, why would they do this? Why would they turn their back on the dollar? Because they're starting to realize that the United States, the central bank of the United States, they benefit the most from the dollar. And the smaller countries, other countries, they are at a disadvantage. So why would nations want to pay for the privilege of having to settle international trade in dollars when they can use their own currency, or maybe gold, or something else? And we're starting to see that countries are saying, you know something? What do I even get for my dollars? The U.S. really doesn't produce that much. There's nothing there that I want. So why am I using the dollar for international trade? It makes no sense. Why don't I use my own currency? And this way, I don't have to pay. It works out better for me. And this is why we see the BRIC system doing this. And many other countries are now latching on to this. And this is going to continue as time goes on. And this is what the U.S. government central bankers are very worried about, because as more and more countries do this, as the Middle Eastern countries step away from using the petrodollar on their natural resources, which affects the dollar, because that means countries don't have to hold the dollar in reserves. That means more dollars flow back to the United States, which means more dollars in circulation, which means the value of the dollar decreases, which means we see hyperinflation here, or inflation, and then it turns into hyperinflation. And we are already seeing this, and the United States government central bankers, once this happens, they know that this whole entire system is doomed. They know it's going to collapse. And we can see already, through all the economic indicators that we've been looking at, is that things are starting to rapidly fall apart. There's no way of pretending that the economy is doing well. Yes, they can keep the stock market pumped up. They're even having trouble now suppressing gold and silver. They suppress it a little bit, and it rises right back up. So we're already seeing signs that this is getting harder and harder to manipulate, and this makes them very, very worried. And what we're seeing right now, as we go into more and more of the months in this year, we're starting to see that things are really starting to accelerate. Things are not improving, and the collapse, it is just right there, right in front of us, when the whole entire system just completely comes to a screeching halt. And this is why you need to be prepared and ready for this. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.